Coming to you not actually live from my disaster of a reading room. It's my February wrap-up. Yes, indeed, it is time again for that wrap-up at the end of the month. How has February gone this quickly? I have to say, I had a terrible reading month in February. Well, terrible in a relative sense. I read 16 books total. 15, one of them was a short story. How do you count that? I'm going to count it because I'll take the wins I can get at this point. Not horrendous reading month in general, and I definitely finished my February TBR, but normally I achieve more than that, and that's a bummer for me. Nonetheless, I was looking through what I read, and I read some really good stuff this month, so let's have a quick little chatty wrap-up where I tell you about everything that I read. I started the month with my reread of Kings of the Wild and then Bloody Rose by Nicholas Eames. These are both books in the Band series, which I didn't know what it was called, but I do now because I've written the review for it. I had read these before and I liked them. I hadn't read them close together before, and I think that made a big difference in my experience of some of the more emotional parts of book 2. I did enjoy these books. I think they are huge fun. They are genuinely humorous fantasy. They do that thing of being a funny book that still then pulls the rug out from under your feet and suddenly you're crying. I cried at both of these. Let me check my books I cried at list. Yes, I did. I think they're really well written. I think the adventure is good. I think they are just a fun time. I don't necessarily love the way that Nicholas Eames writes some of the female characters some of the time. They just feel a little bit caricature-y, but I think the same can be said for some of the male characters, so I'm probably being a little bit harsh there, but if I was nitpicking, that would be what I would nitpick. But I definitely enjoy both of these. Before reading both of them together, I would have said, just read Bloody Rose, it's a better time, because I think it is. There's less talk about various characters' tits. Having now read both of them, I would say it's still worth reading Kings of the World. As I say, you get that emotional payoff, and it's a fun book. What can I say? Then I had my reread of This Is How You Lose the Time War. This is a beautiful, beautiful novella. I think what really struck me about this novella is its rereadability. I think there is so much detail crammed into here and so much really subtle detail that you definitely get more out of it on a reread, which I wasn't necessarily expecting, because I think towards the end of this there is a thing that is revealed that is a very different experience on a reread, but I actually thought it was really positive. I had a really good time with this. What I love about this book is that it doesn't explain everything, it doesn't dig into the world building in an extremely detailed way, but I really like that because I think it allows you to fill in the gaps yourself and, as I say, build on it with different rereads and go, oh, I hadn't noticed that before, that's really interesting. I have talked about this before on the channel, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if you are looking for a novella to read, this is one of my top recommendations. I have now read enough novellas that I should probably do a novella recommendations video, but I don't know if it would just be identical to the one Justine did. I'll have a ponder about that one, let me know if that's something you'd like. So I actually read this next book on digital arc, but I then got sent a copy after I'd finished it, which is usually the way. I mean, it happens, but this is obviously A Desolation Called Peace by Katie Martine, and I read this with Angela and had a wonderful time, and my review for it might be up either by the time you're watching this, or it will be out very, very soon, so if you haven't already and you want to see that, do subscribe. This is absolutely fantastic, though. It's a wonderful sequel to A Memory Called Empire, which I talked about last month. Just amazing. My biggest recommendations are take it slowly and buddy read it. Find someone to read it with you, with whom you can discuss all of the things, because I think you will have a much better time doing this. But I love the way this book builds on book 1. If you didn't like book 1, I don't think you will like book 2, because they are very much kindred spirits. But you just get so much more out of this, and it really explores the themes, and I'm excited to see what's next from Katie Martine, because there's some good stuff. So the next book does also have a review up already. This is Archive of the Forgotten by AJ Hackwood. This is the sequel to Library of the Unwritten, and I definitely thought this was good. I thought it was a good sequel. I think book 1 is slightly stronger, just in the energy of it, the adventure spirit of it. This next book is a little bit more conceptual, which is interesting if you're really into that world building concept ideas. I was more in it for the characters and the plot, and there's still lots of that, but I'm hoping that book 3 will strike that balance even better and we'll just have like a wonderful adventure that's a bit conceptual. That's my preference. As I say, you can check out that review if you want to hear more about that series. Now we're on to the 2 books that I have technically unhauled. I haven't taken them to the book bank yet, but I have technically unhauled them. I read We Hunt the Flame, and this is the one of the 2 books I'm unhauling that I did still enjoy. I still think it's a good story. I'm just not in a place where I want to hang on to this. I don't particularly want to reread it, which is my criteria for keeping a book. This is a good YA fantasy. It has a lot of It has a lot of the YA fantasy elements that I like, and it does some different things with some of them, but not different enough that I was super keen to read it. And then when I looked at the plot to the second one, it didn't seem like it was doing that much different, so I was kind of like, I think I can say goodbye to this. And then a YA that I'm unholding because it's genuinely just not very good. They are releasing the sequel for this soon, though. This is The Cerulean by Amy Ewing, and I did not enjoy this. I like the idea of it. You have this, you know, being who is a cerulean, which is like a kind of are people who are tethered to Earth, and she falls to Earth and she meets a boy and the sister is way more interesting, and the sister in this book is like she wants to do science, and her dad's like, no, you shall be married off, and like that's the story I'm interested in. But instead it really starts to focus in on her brother, who is just a horrible person from the get, and I was like, I don't care about her brother, why am I reading this? And yeah, as predicted in my TBR, I thought I might end up getting rid of this, and I am. I'm not going to make an overbooked video on it, because I think I would just seem very odd indeed to be holding on to this book I didn't really like. But it is stunning though. It is just beautiful. I love a bit of silvery foil. It's nice. But I shall say goodbye. After that, I finished Animorphs 16. That video is not up yet. Where am I at with Animorphs? No, I'm not. It's not 16 yet, but that will be up in March at some point, so stay tuned for that one if you want to catch up on the series. Ding ding ding! I'm moving from Animorphs into something completely different. Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. This was also a reread. Lots of rereading this month. Lots of rereading next month. I'm gonna deal with it, it's fine. I was surprised by how much I still liked this, and I talked about it in the vlog, but I think a big part of the reason is that I know the TV series of Neverwhere, front to back. I know every shot. It was just one of those things where as a teenager I was like, what is this? I shall consume it every single day. I find Neil Gaiman's writing of female characters not that great, and feel free to argue with me on that, but I don't find them particularly wonderful. Certainly not in the books of his that I've read. And this is another one where I was kind of like, I don't care about your main character that much, and maybe you're not meant to, but you know, I love the world of Neverwhere. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's a really good take on an alternate London, which is something we've seen a fair amount of times. I really like Neil Gaiman's take on it. I like the world building, I like the detail, not wild about the characters, not wild about the way that the plot plays out. But you know, something where you can read the book and entirely picture the TV series in your head is not to be sniffed at. After that, I finished Shadow Scent: The Darkest Bloom by PM Freestone. This is another YA. Rereading always means I reread YA. This is a YA where the focus is on scent-based magic skill. It's a little bit unclear. There's some magic in there. It's also about kind of healing in some ways, but yeah, a lot of this world is focused in on smell. I really loved the world building in this. I liked a lot of the different ways that smell focused society came into play. It's really interesting. I won't say I was wild about the actual plot. Potentially that's again my lack of desire to read a YA plot at the moment, because I think they are sometimes a little bit formulaic, but I do have the sequel. I am currently about 10 pages into that, and I'm seeing if reading the sequel makes me like this a bit more, because I'm hoping to get a little bit more out of the characters, and I think that could happen in book 2. We shall see. There's just a lot of setup in a first book in a series, isn't there? Sometimes that really works, and sometimes you're just there going, I want to get to whatever you're actually trying to write, you know? After that, I listened to the audiobook of Nnedi Okorafor's Remote Control. Why can that it never like strings through in my head properly? This is a absolutely fantastic audiobook and a fantastic story. You know, I'm a sucker for a book that deals with the idea of death or reaping or any kind of death practice. I'm there for it. It's in my channel name, and this absolutely delivers on that. If you haven't encountered this book, I really think you should. It's not super long in audiobook form. It's about 4 hours. You can get through that in a day, especially if you listen to it faster, as I do. 100% recommend. I think that was my only 5-star read that wasn't a reread this month, which is, you know, pretty darn impressive. The writing is beautiful, the description is beautiful, the setting is fantastic, the amount of detail that it goes into is just right for a novella. Ugh. If I could give it 6 out of 10, I would, and I can, and I do. Oh, after that, I did my short story that I don't know if counts or not, but I'm gonna count it anyway, and that was, I can never remember what it's called, The World is Full of Monsters by Jeff Vandemir. This is a weird short story that's sort of quite conceptual, huge amounts of descriptive writing, I guess. One that I would recommend reading. I think I need to read it again, and maybe that's a good thing. But it wasn't like Dead Gin in Cairo, where I was like, now I want more in this world. It was more, that was an experience. Cool. Which, you know, is fine too. It's sort of story monsters, and a weird kind of rebirth idea. I listened to it quite late at night, and yeah, it was something. There we go. I can't work out where I've put my copy of Stardust, but I definitely read it and I definitely finished it, and it is somewhere in this room. Neil Gaiman's Stardust. Stardust, similar to Neverwhere, to be honest. I really like the tone of this book in particular. The fairy tale element to it is very cool. I know the film, frontways, sideways, back to back, and the film and the book are very different, to the point where they're almost completely separate entities that just feature some of the same scenes, I guess. And I respect the book for what it is as a different thing, but the film is just so much better. It's so much more fun. The characters are better. There are more exciting world building elements, and it feels less like a story about a guy that you don't really like. I would say if you love the film, it is still worth reading the book just because it's interesting, but I wouldn't be saying like, oh, you have to pick up Stardust. If you haven't read Stardust, you're not even reading. It's just one of those books that if you happen to own it, it's worth reading, I guess. It's like a solid 4-star for me, in that I enjoy it, but I'm not like, oh yay, that book again, you know? Getting towards the end of the month now, I finished Other Words for Smoke by Sarah Maria Griffin. This is one of my favourite books to talk about when I want a weird book, and I think it has come up in a weird books video before, and probably Halloween as well, because it's kind of a haunted house story. I don't want to talk too much about this because I think it would spoil it for you, but it's a sapphic haunted house story set in Ireland that's sort of like a modern, it's simultaneously very old and very modern, and I really like the kind of vibes of this book is just fantastic, and juxtaposing these like neon pink sprayed edges and the kind of like froofy cover with what's inside, I love everything about it, and it's one of those books I think I could reread hundreds of times because I really like being in the writing of it, if that makes sense. It's a writing that I enjoy reading, even though it's super creepy. If you're in the mood for a haunted house story that's not, it's not scary, it's just sort of eerie, that's what this is, I think. Where am I going with this statement? You should read this. That's where I'm going. After that, I finished my audiobook of Fool's Assassin. This is by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Fitz and the Fool series. I have mixed feelings about this one. Definitely still enjoying Robin Hobb's writing. I love how she writes characters. I love how she creates people that you just deeply dislike. She's so good at creating characters where you know who you like and you know who you don't like. And then sometimes she'll just twist that and you'll be like, oh no, now I love that person and I think this person is behaving badly. That kind of thing. Top-notch work in this book. I think that I still don't like Fitz that much as a character, so I find it very hard to care about him when things go wrong, which has an impact on your enjoyment of this series as a whole, I expect. But also there's a few moments of like, why have you not noticed this yet? This very obvious thing that has happened, why have you not realised that's what's happening? I don't understand how you could not realise that this is happening. That kind of thing is featuring a fair amount in this series so far, so we'll see how that goes, but I loved how this book ended. I'm really excited to read the next one, and I think it's going to be a really good time reading the rest of the books. Finding the time to read audiobooks at the moment is not my strong suit, and then when I do find time to read them, I want to read like an hour at a time, not 5 minutes, and that's quite difficult to do at the moment. So I don't know how long it's going to take me to read the next one. We shall see. Rounding off the month, finishing off my TBR, I finished Animorphs 17. It was alright. It was my least favourite Animorphs book so far. That video will be coming out in April, but essentially it's just a book that features a lot of talk about mental health and psychiatric hospitals, and it's very, very of its time, but at the same time, I don't think it was ever a nice way to talk about these issues, and it's just a little bit uncomfortable. It set me on edge, and I can appreciate the book for what it is, and there's still some fun moments in the book, but it's going to be a hard video to film when I do film it, because, yeah, there's some stuff goes on in that. So yeah, I read 16 books in February. 8 of those were rereads, so exactly half. How nice. As I think I said in my March TBR, I am trying to rein in the amount of rereading I'm doing because my TBR currently stands at 48 books. 48? Yes. And I think it might even be on 49 because I might not have added some things to my spreadsheet. So not good. Not good. There's lots of reading to be done. As I said at the beginning, not a great reading month. A couple of things that I really loved. Desolation Called Peace I thought was fantastic. Remote Control I thought was wonderful. But a lot of stuff that just sort of didn't quite hit the mark for me, or maybe I wasn't in the right place for. I think February has just been a bit of a down month. I think watching back some of the vlog stuff, it's been really evident that it's just been dark and miserable. And now it is a gloriously sunny end to the month. I have to say, it's just beautiful outside. You can't tell in here, but it is gorgeous. And I'm hoping that this like shift into spring will mean a bit of a bump up in the reading. And to be honest, looking back, I've read less in February 2020, so it's fine. I think if I had to pick a favourite book of the month, it would probably be Desolation Called Peace, I think, was my favourite thing that I read, and if I had to pick a least favourite, it would be Animorph 17. But yes, let me know what your favourite book of February was, or your least favourite book. How was your reading for the year going? Did you find February as rough as I did? I would love to know all of these things. Please do tell me. While you're down there commenting all of that stuff, if you haven't already, you can also subscribe, because it makes me feel loved and appreciated, and it motivates me to read all of the things, all of those 48 books. They must be read at some point. In the meantime, I'm going to get to reading my March TBR that's sat down here. So, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. There's going to be some bloopers now. Also, I'm not going to go into too much detail. Making a mess behind me, like it isn't already a mess. Haha. What's next in my notes?